And welcome back. KTCR, Kill the Cat Radio, back with another one. Season 1, Episode 8 on the hot list. Now I'd like you to close your eyes for a moment and let us here at Kill the Cat Radio transport you to another time and place. The time? February 1932. The place? Paris. You're sitting alone, sipping on a café crème in the Pigalle district. You watch each of the passerbys with a casual fascination. But a specific woman catches your attention. She's petite and well-dressed, and as she arrives at the cafe table, you can tell by the way she moves that she comes from a refined background. Or perhaps an actress of stage or screen. She's polite and well-mannered to the waiter when ordering her glass of Chablis. Her porcelain-colored hand reaches into her purse and she pulls out a small leather-bound journal. And then she begins to write. Please understand that I am in full rebellion against my own mind. That when I live by impulse, by emotion, by white heat. My mind didn't exist when we walked insanely through Paris, oblivious to people, to time, to place, to others. It didn't exist when I first read Dostoevsky in my hotel room and laughed and cried together, couldn't sleep, and didn't know where I was. But afterwards, understand me, when all basis, all awareness, all control had been knocked out of my being, afterwards, I made tremendous effort to rise again, not to wallow anymore, not to go on just suffering or burning. And I grasped all things. I want to be able to live in utter madness, but I also want to be able to understand afterwards, to grasp what I had lived through. I may be wrong. You see, I can give you proof that the living madness is more precious to me than my own thoughts. And however much I think of you, I couldn't give you what feelings I've lived through. I could give you explanations, general talk, etc., but feelings themselves, no. I could also give you the only criticism I could make of Dostoevsky. And there are in my journal 4 pages of my incoherent feelings about reading The Possessed. Can you understand that? Only thought comes to the surface. Though very often, when your letter moves me, as I've told you from the first time, I'm almost ready to give everything to you. Just as that day I was so upset and beside myself. I was about to read you everything I'd ever written in any journal. Even if I do that, understand me, what first comes is the artist. The sensing through emotion. That by sensations which I feel and which breaks me to pieces. I'm not always just living. I'm just following all of my fantasies. Because I come up for air, for understanding. Both of us, we went to the edge with our 2 imaginations and we died together. So I sit down and I try to tell you. To tell you that I'd much rather go on living ecstatically and unknowing to you, to all, and I will because of my demonic creative power of realization and coordinating mystery. I am the one who will tear all the veils, but not yet. I don't want to. I love my mystery. I love the abstract world I live in, the forcing out of delicate, profound, vague, obscure, voluptuous, wordless sensations into something you can seize on. Perhaps I'll announce my mind, my work, my efforts, and merely live, suffer, wallow, elude your knowledge, your seizure. Why do you want more clarity, more knowledge? You don't ask that of Dostoevsky. You thank God for the living chaos. Because you are, too, a writer, and all mysteries inspire you, but they must be dominated and conquered. And don't worry about the effects of your correcting my English. Nothing could ever make me conscious. I don't really care about beautiful and perfect English. If it comes out beautiful or perfect, very well then. I'm willing to work, but you know, I don't care enough about that. I am just so full, so excited, so feverish, that language will always drag and lag behind. The writer of those words is Anais, a French-born, Cuban-blooded writer who shaped the course of creative nonfiction forever. Essentially, she practiced documenting everything around her, and responded to it with such elegant poetics and philosophical insight. It's very common nowadays for people to turn their personal experiences into some kind of novel. The memoir, no doubt, is one of the more financially successful markets in the literary world today. But this was not so in 1932. Anais Nin became the originator of the self-revealing memoir. Her world was the inner world of the unconscious, and she, unabashedly, revealed that world to the rest of us through her collections of diaries and reflections. She is the progenitor of the confessional novel, writing the story of the story in the grand tradition of St. Augustine and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. No woman before her dared to be so bold, to break out of the confines of writing a drawing room bourgeois novel. Nin aimed for something much more intoxicating, to be a free woman to love and to live life on her own terms. She once wrote, "Ordinary life does not interest me. I seek only the high moments. I am in accord with the surrealists, searching for the marvelous. I want to be a writer who reminds others that these moments exist. I want to prove that there is infinite space, infinite meaning, and infinite dimension. But I am not always in what I call a state of grace. I have days of illuminations and fevers. I have days when the music in my head stops, that I mend socks, prune trees, can fruits, polish furniture. But while I am doing this, I feel like I am not living. Unlike Madame Bovary, I am not going to take the poison. I have finished my book, D.H. Lawrence, An Unprofessional Study, and I wrote it in 16 days. I had to go to Paris to present it to Edward Titus for publication. It will not be published and out by tomorrow, which is what a writer would like when the book is hot out of the oven, when it is still alive within oneself. He gave it to his assistant to revise. As soon as I go to Paris too often, my mother looks disapprovingly out of her window and does not wave goodbye. My brother Joaquin plays the piano continuously, as if he would melt the walls of the house. I take long walks along the railroad tracks on bad days, but as I've never been able to read a timetable, I never walk here at the right time, and I get tired before the train comes to deliver me from the difficulties of living, so I walk back home. Does this fascination for a possible accident come from the traumatic time when I missed such a death as a child? My father had seduced one of his servants and then forgot about her. And then she sought revenge. She took my brother and me on an outing and left the carriage and me beside it in the middle of the railroad tracks. But the signal gateman saw us, and as he had 7 children of his own, he took a chance on his own life and rushed out in time to kick the carriage out of the way and carry me off in his arms. The event remained in our memory, and I still remember the beds covered with toys for the 7 children of the man who saved our lives. Anais Nin's time was around the birth of surrealism in Europe. Sigmund Freud's theories of psychoanalysis were drumming around the cafes. Paris was reeling from a bohemian explosion, and Nin was right in the center of it all. Sort of. She was married young to a wealthy banker, and their suburban life left her feeling suffocated. And although Hugo, her husband, doted on her every wish, Nin still struggled with the volcanic turmoil that churned inside of her. Her journals became her foundation, and when you read them, it's more than just reading gossip. Her early diaries become some sort of living gospel, her mantra. Fiction mingled with autobiography, and those of us obsessed with the 1920s and 30s of Parisian life, me very much included, Anais Nin's journals gave us a fly-on-the-wall perspective of what her world was like, with all the characters and conflicts that surrounded that milieu. For example, she writes, "Richard Osborne is a lawyer. He had to be consulted on the copyrights of my D.H. Lawrence book. He is trying to be both a bohemian and a lawyer for a big firm. He likes to leave his office with money in his pocket and go down to the Montparnasse. He pays for everyone's drinks and dinners, and when he is drunk, he talks about the novel he's going to write. He gets very little sleep and often arrives at his office the next morning with stains and wrinkles on his suit. As if to detract attention from such details, he talks more brilliantly than ever, giving his listeners no time to interrupt or respond. So now everyone's saying, Richard is losing his clients. He can't stop talking. Richard acts like a man on a trapeze who must not look down at the public, because if he looks below, he will fall. He will fall somewhere between his lawyer's office and Montparnasse. No one will know where to look for him, for he hides his 2 faces from everyone. There are times when he's still asleep in some unknown hotel, with an unknown woman, when he should be at the office, and there's other times when he's working late at his office, while his friends are waiting for him at the Café du Dôme. He has 2 recurrent monologues. One is patterned after a trial for plagiarism. It seems that a great many people have copied his novels, his plays, and his ideas. He is preparing a long brief to sue them. They always steal his briefcase. One of the novels stolen from him is now published, and one of his plays is being acted on Broadway in New York City. That is why he does not show his present novel to me or to anyone else. His other monologue concerns his friend Henry Miller. Henry Miller is writing a book 1,000 pages long, which has everything in it that is left out of every other novel. He has now taken refuge in Richard's hotel. Richard says, "Every morning when I leave, he's still asleep. I leave 10 francs on the table, and when I return, there's another batch of writing done." I have read Henry Miller's work. His writing has a primitive, savage quality to it. By contrast with the other writers I've been reading, it seems like a jungle. He only wrote a short article, but the words are slung like hatchets, explode with hatred, and it was like hearing wild drums in the midst of the Tuileries Gardens. You live like this, sheltered in a delicate world, and you believe you are living. Then you read a book, Lady Chatterley, for instance, or you take a trip, or you talk with Richard, and you discover that you are not living, that you are hibernating. The symptoms of hibernating are easily detectable. At first, there is restlessness. The second symptom, when hibernating becomes dangerous and might degenerate into death, is the absence of pleasure. That is all. It appears like an innocuous illness, monotony, boredom, death. Millions live like this or die like this without knowing it. They work in offices, they drive a car, they picnic with their families, they raise children, and then some shock treatment takes place, a person, a book, a song, and it awakens them and saves them from death. Some never awaken. They are like the people who go to sleep in the snow and never wake up. But I am not in danger because my home, my garden, my beautiful life does not lull me. I am aware of being in a beautiful prison, from which I can only escape by writing. So I have written a book about D.H. Lawrence out of gratitude, because it was he who awakened me. I took it to Richard, and he prepared the contracts, and then he talked about his friend Henry Miller. He then showed my manuscript to Henry Miller, and Miller said, "I have never read such strong truths told with such delicacy." "I would like to bring him to dinner," said Richard. And I said yes. So delicacy and violence are about to meet and challenge each other. The image this brings to my mind is an alchemist workshop. Beautiful crystal bottles communicating with each other by a system of fragile crystal canals. These transparent bottles show nothing but jeweled colored liquids, or clouded water or smoke, giving to the external eye an abstract aesthetic pleasure. The consciousness of danger, fatal mixtures, is known only to the chemist. I feel like a well-appointed laboratory of the soul, myself, my home, my life, in which none of the vitally fecund or destructive, explosive experiments have yet to begun. I like the shape of the bottles and the color of the chemicals. I collect bottles, and the more they look like alchemist bottles, the more I like them for their eloquent forms. People, both men and women, were drawn to Nin's feline grace and hungry intellect. The ranks of those that had befriended her and were her cohorts are a true list of the who's who of intellects during the era. Otto Rank, Antonin Artaud, the list goes on and on. Of course, most notably for their first friendship, then passionate lover turned lifelong ally, Mr. Henry Miller. Here's her unbelievably detailed introduction to her meeting with Mr. Miller. Of course, chock full of her own observations and poetic theories. When I saw Henry Miller walking to the door where I stood waiting, I closed my eyes for an instant just to see him by some inner eye. He was warm, joyous, relaxed, and natural. He would have passed anonymously through a crowd. He was slender, lean, and not tall. He looked like a Buddhist monk. His blue eyes were cool and observant, but his mouth was emotional and vulnerable. He was so different from his brutal, violent, vital writings, his caricatures, his Rabelaisian farces, his exaggerations. The smile at the corner of his eyes is almost clownish, and the mellow tones of his voice are almost like a purring content. He is a man whom life intoxicates, who has no need of wine, and is floating in a self-created euphoria. In the middle of a serious discussion between Richard and Joaquin, he began to laugh. Seeing the perplexity on Richard's face, he said, "I'm not laughing at you, Richard, but I just can't help myself. I don't care a bit who's right. I'm too happy. I'm just so happy at this moment. With all the colors around me, the fire in the fireplace, the good dinner, the wine. The whole moment is so wonderful. It's wonderful." He talked slowly as if he enjoyed his own words. He installed himself completely in the present. He appeared gentle and candid. He admitted he had only come because of Richard's promise of a good dinner. But now he wanted to know the whole house and everyone living in it, and what each person did, and asked question after question with a casual unrelentingness. Miller talked with Joaquin about music and about his compositions and his concerts. He went to shake my mother's hand. He visited the garden, looked over all the books. He was full of curiosity, and then sitting by the fire, he finally began to talk about himself. Last night I spent the night in the Cinema de Quartier. I had nowhere else to go. I slipped down in the seat and went to sleep. They never clean up the place until morning, and even the femme de ménage only grunts when she sees me and lets me off. Did you ever stay in a movie house when it's empty? Films are like a dose of opium. Then as you come out into the street, it's like a shock, and you're brutally awakened from your dream. But when you stay, you never really wake up. The dream goes on working. I would fall asleep for a while and then see the images on the screen, and I couldn't tell the difference between the film or a dream. The two sides of himself showed simultaneously, an acceptance and passivity in life, and then rebellion and anger at whatever happened to him. He has endured and then must avenge himself, and probably in his writing. It's the writer's delayed reaction. Henry is like a mythical animal. His writing is flamboyant, torrential, chaotic, treacherous, and dangerous. He would always say, "Our age has a need of violence." I enjoy the power of his writing, the ugly, destructive, fearless, cathartic strength. The strange mixture of worship of life, enthusiasm, passion, interest in everything, energy, exuberance, laughter, and then sudden destructive storms. Everything is blasted away. Hypocrisy, fear, pettiness, falsity. It is an assertion of instinct. He uses the first person and real names, and he repudiates order and form and fiction itself. He writes in the uncoordinated way we feel, on various levels all at once. I've always believed in André Breton's freedom to write as one thinks, and the order and disorder in which one feels and thinks, to follow sensations and absurd correlations of events and images, and to trust the new realms they lead us into. Truly the cult of the marvelous. But it is also the cult of the unconscious leadership, the cult of mystery, the evasion of false logic, the cult of the unconscious as proclaimed by Rimbaud. It is not madness. It is an effort to transcend the rigidities and the patterns made by the rational mind. Amazing stuff. However, friends, we must now address the critics. Many have claimed that Nin played armchair to her more notably famous male counterparts, but this couldn't be further from the truth. It was Anais Nin who became the inspiration for so many of these progressive thinkers and artists. Her works, ranging from the erotic to the poetic, exemplified her unyielding marriage to a passion and a lifestyle so rarely lived. She became a pyromaniac of the arts, setting fires and lighting fuses for so many that followed in her inspired footsteps. But is she now taught in modern classrooms here in the United States? No. I have never ran across any of her writings or philosophies during my university education, and it's odd to me that, of all people, the modern feminist movement hasn't embraced her as an early acolyte. It is truly a shame that I have spoken to so many young women who have no idea about her journals or her writings. So, here at Kill the Cat Radio, we will take up the mantle and expose Nin and many of her contemporaries to the world, so that people will finally get a chance to experience this force in literary history. That's what we do here. And like always, we want her words to speak for themselves. So on that note, I'll leave you with these. This is an excerpt from one of her books called The House of Incest. The morning I got up to begin this book, I coughed. Something was coming out of my throat. It was strangling me. I broke the thread which held it and yanked it out. I went back to bed and said, I have just spat out my heart. There's an instrument called the quena, made of human bones, and it owes its origin to the worship of an Indian for his mistress. When she died, he made a flute out of her bones. Quena has a more penetrating, more haunting sound than the ordinary flute. Those who write know the process. I thought of it as I was spitting out my heart, only I do not wait for my love to die. My first vision of earth was water veiled. I am of the race of men and women who see all things through this curtain of sea, and my eyes are the color of water. I looked with chameleon eyes upon the changing face of the world, and looked with anonymous vision upon my uncompleted self. I remember my first birth in water. All around me a sulfurous transparency, and my bones move as if made of rubber. I sway and float, stand on boneless toes, listening for distant sounds, sounds beyond the reach of human ears, see things beyond the reach of human eyes, born full of memories of the bells of Atlantide, always listening for lost souls and searching for lost colors, standing forever on the threshold, like one troubled with memories, and walking with a swimming stride. I cut the air with wide slicing fins and swim through wall-less rooms, ejected from a paradise of soundlessness, cathedrals wavering at the passage of a body like soundless music. This Atlantide can be found again only at night, by the root of the dream. As soon as sleep covered the rigid new city, the rigidity of the new world, the heaviest portals slid open on smooth-oiled gongs, and one entered the voicelessness of the dream. The terror and joy of murders, accomplished in silence, in the silence of slidings and brushings. The blanket of water lying over all things, stifling the voice. Only a monster brought me up on the surface by accident, lost in the colors of Atlantide, the colors running into one another without frontiers, fishes made of velvet, of organdy with lace fangs, made of spangled taffeta, of silks and feathers and whiskers, with lacquered flanks and rock crystal eyes, fishes of withered leather, with gooseberry eyes, eyes like the white of egg, flowers palpitating on stalks like sea hearts, none of them feeling their own weight, the seahorse moving like a feather. It was like yawning. I love the ease and the blindness in the suave voyages on the water bearing one through obstacles. The water was there to bear one like a giant bosom. There was always the water to rest on, and the water transmitted the lives and the loves, the words and the thoughts. Far beneath the level of storms I slept. I moved within color and music as inside a sea diamond. There were no currents of thoughts, only the caress of flow and desire mingling, touching, traveling, withdrawing, wandering, the endless bottoms of space. I do not remember being cold there, nor warm, no pain of cold and heat, the temperature of sleep, feverless and chillless. I do not remember being hungry. Food seeped through invisible pores. I do not remember weeping. I felt only the caress of moving into the body of another, absorbed and lost within the flesh of another, lulled by the rhythm of the water, the slow palpitation of the senses, the movement of silk, loving without knowingness, moving without effort, in the soft current of water and desire, breathing in an ecstasy of disillusion. I awoke at dawn, thrown up on a rock, the skeleton of a ship, choked in its own sails. That's it for this week. KTCR, Kill the Cat Radio. I'm Matthew Diabate, signing off. Join us next week. Until then, stay curious and have a good night.